Okay, AP Psych, we are now into our unit on development for part three. We did prenatal development, the more physical elements. We then did cognitive development. Part three is on our social development. So let's take a look here at the concept of attachment. We know from our discussion in part one that obviously we come biologically pre-wired to form social bonds with people, in that a human infant has the inability to probably survive on its own. And there's a number of examples of that to talk about in social development. Um, First, we have body contact and the importance of body contact on the overall physical and mental well-being of a newborn. This would be why there are examples of volunteer positions within hospitals. To, or not so much hospitals, but like foster homes and orphanages, concerning holding babies, that we know that the contact, comfort, or body contact is important. If a child is hospitalized as a newborn, like in the NICU, they work very closely with those nurses and the parents of the child to ensure that as much physical contact can happen. Lots of physiological and psychological benefits to that. A lot of our attachment will eventually have to do with familiarity. If we link this back to Piaget's theory of cognitive development, we notice that things like like stranger anxiety, or the fear of unknown people, tend to develop around the same time that object permanence does. So about prior to 8 months of age, an infant is happy being held by anyone. As long as they're being held and cared for, they're happy. But there comes a point where familiarity, the people that an infant is used to being around, and the understanding cognitively that things and people exist even when you can't see them, starts to develop even stronger bonds between an infant and his or her family members. We know that this is probably, again, a critical period. Especially in the world of animals, like if you think about birds, they, because their survival is dependent upon them, being with their parent, and birds being able to, move around, at an early age. Like you have those classic examples of imprinting in the animal world, like, bonding with, the bird or the animal that is caring for them. So like all those cute YouTube videos of, like, dog raising kitten, oh, so cute, right? Would be examples of the fact that this is crucial to our survival. And so there's probably a crucial time for it to happen. Humans tend to be able to develop attachments outside of infancy, but the bonds developed at this time are very strong. And so there's something to be said about that. Harry Harlow did a lot of famous experiments, some probably questionably ethical, given that we have a lot of new regulations concerning the research on primates. But what he did is if you remember from 40 studies, he removed baby monkeys from their mother and gave them the option of a soft terry cloth mother, or a wire monkey that provided food. And if the animal world, what most people thought is that the reason bonding happened was simply because the caregiver was the source of food, but he's the one that did the research that it was beyond that contact, comfort, body contact are just as important to our overall development as is food. And these monkeys that were raised in social isolation have difficulty in their adult monkey lives forming relationships with others. And so that plays a big role here concerning parenting. Parenting versus temperament. Remember that our temperament is our emotional reactivity, or our emotional intensity. And we have a lot of evidence that kind of endures over time. And so parenting's probably not going to change the fact that some people are just more intense and unpredictable, and some are just kind of more predictable, more relaxed, and more laid back. And so heredity might predispose some of those, personality differences amongst us. But parenting obviously is still going to be important for a couple of reasons. We'll do styles of parenting on the next slide. Erik Erikson, we talked about him concerning, being a psychodynamic theorist. His concept was that our development, he altered this, that it was a psychosocial development, and he focused less on the physical relationship like Freud had, and more just on our social bonds with people. And he would say that securely attached infants approach life with a sense of basic trust, and that infants that don't have the sense of basic trust end up being very leery of people in general, very slow to warm up to people, and may have issues forming healthy relationships as an adult as a result of that loss of trust in childhood. We know that the deprivation of attachment, from the dangers of that from Harlow's research with monkeys, sadly from examples of feral children. Sadly, children, there are examples of children that have been raised in social isolation. Those individuals tend to either react with fear or aggression when it comes to social situations. And so we know that the effects of that physically in the all those releases of stress hormone, a fend for yourself attitude at a young age, may alter the development of the young brain's neurotransmitter serotonin. So there might be some link to depression at an older age as a result of that deprivation of attachment. But the good thing is that we tend to be resilient, and when children are placed in a more positive and stable environment, they're going to kind of recover from those disruptions in attachment. But again, the key being, are we still within the critical period, or has the deprivation been long-term? The longer it happened, and what time period in development it occurred are going to play a role in recovery. Big question for lots of people, does daycare hurt the attachment of child to parents? No. Experts agree that it doesn't constitute some sort of risk factor in our development. High quality childcare, though, you get what you pay for, I guess. Warm, supportive interactions with adults in a very safe, stimulating, healthy environment are obviously best. And then, just like that's why we have laws against, like one person being able to, run a daycare of 32-year-olds. That's just not legal. More important than the time spent in daycare in influencing the development tend to be, the quality of the family time at home. Like, there's a correlation between a family's economic and education level. A correlation, right? And that probably has a lot to do with the fact that, with higher education probably comes a more stable economic situation, which probably means the fact that parents have more time to spend with their kids. And that's not passing judgment necessarily. It's just, if you're working all the time to, feed all the mouths on the home front, you don't have a lot of time to form those attachments. And so, but throwing daycare under the bus is not necessary in this case. Okay. Concerning your self-concept, okay, that is the big social achievement of childhood. Usually by about age 12, we've got a pretty good idea of who you are as an individual, okay, or your self-concept, okay. there your image of yourself probably becomes stable in late elementary school, early middle school. Children can begin to describe themselves in terms of gender, group membership, psychological traits. They can compare themselves to other people, okay, and in that discovery of their identity. Positive self-image and a positive self-concept, right? Hopefully we can raise children to be confident, independent, optimistic, sociable, but assertive individuals. Those are healthy individuals. Parenting styles probably play a role in this as well. There's some differences there. Strict permissive is one dimension we can evaluate him on, and so is warm and cold. And so obviously strict is a high amount of rules. Permissive is a more lenient environment. Warm would be concerning the affection. Cold would be a lack of affection. And so you can do a combination. You can have a strict cold parenting style, a permissive cold, a strict warm, a strict cold. And so the best, believe it or not, is a strict warm parenting style. Children don't want to think that, but permissive, most children that are raised in the permissive environment as adults will recognize that that permissiveness was probably somewhat of laziness on the part of parents, like that whether it's intended to be that way or not. A very permissive environment gives children the indication that parents don't care enough about them to discipline them when they are guilty of wrongdoing, and so that can play a role in their development. And so you want to be an authoritative parent, not an authoritarian. Authoritarian is a strict cold, and authoritative is a strict warm. Okay, and so setting standards, enforcing them, but discussing the reasons why. And again, think back to Unit 10, with Carl Rogers and that unconditional positive regard. Like, look, kiddo, you screwed up. You knew the rules. These are the consequences for your action. It doesn't change the fact that I love you, but you screwed up, and there are consequences to pay. Like, that's an authoritative environment. An authoritarian environment is really just making demands and expecting obedience simply for the sake of obedience. Like, I'm in charge and I will, coerce you and exert my power over you because I can. That there's no reason behind it. That usually in studies means that children tend to have issues with self-esteem, self-reliance, social competence, because they're afraid of making mistakes, and they've been told that they can't think for themselves. They've always been told what to do, what to think, how to act, and so they tend to have some issues, right, as adults. Okay, so there is our social development there. We'll talk about some gender differences coming up in our next one. I should have mentioned one other thing here. Obviously, if we look on a sociocultural perspective, Western, more individualized cultures tend to foster more like independence and emotional closeness. Is something that's more of a collectivist thing, like that sense of family. A strong sense of family tends to be seen more in collectivist cultures, because your honor is dependent upon your family's view of your actions. Okay, now we're done. I promise. Thanks for listening.